Good evening, and welcome to our final In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11, being made possible by the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce, Hometown Media Group, and Whitewater Community Television. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening, whether you're doing it on WGTV Channel 11, whether you're watching on our video on demand site, WGTV Online, or whether it's up. Whether you're watching on Facebook Live, we appreciate you doing that. We will put up information as we go through this evening, and please feel free, there it is. If there's a question that you have for our candidates, we are taking your questions, 973-8587. You can comment on Facebook or on Twitter at WCTV Info, and we will introduce the candidates as well as my co-host, quote unquote, this evening after we get through just a couple of quick things to take care of. Want to remind you that voting in person, early, absentee, whatever it is you want to call it, voting has already begun at the voter registration office. It happens Monday through Friday, 8:30 or Monday, 8:30 to 5, Tuesday, 8:30 to 4:30. That will go through until we get to when the vote centers open, which is October 28th through November 1st, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. That will be at the Coleman Center, as well as First English Lutheran Church. Also, you see on the screen that the Coleman Center will be open from 10 until 3 on Saturday, October 26th and November 2nd. And then, of course, there is the infamous Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. is the time at the Coleman Center, Mount Olive Baptist Church, First English Lutheran Church, First Baptist Church, and the Go Lay Center in Cambridge City will also be open. If you live in Dublin or if you live in Milton, where you also have town council elections going on, if you're in Richmond, you can do your voting at the vote center, the Coleman Center, Mount Olive, First English, or First Baptist Church. And if you're in Richmond and you happen to be over in Western Wayne County for the day and you want to vote, you can do that at the Go Lay Center. So the Wayne County Clerk's Office has made things very easy as far as being able to get out and vote. One other thing we do need to mention, that if you go into the ballot box and you vote a straight party ticket, you still need to vote for council at large. Those candidates that were here with us last week, Sue Roberson, Jane Bumelow, Yvonne Washington, Ron Oler, Nick Dunlap, and Larry Parker, those candidates are at large, and a straight party vote does not cover that race. So you still need to vote for those candidates individually. Everybody got that straight?
I think so.
Great. We're here to talk with candidates running for the office of mayor for the city of Richmond. I hope you all aren't going to be that quiet for the entire 90 minutes, or this could be a long show. We are joined by Brian Ballinger with the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. Appreciate you being back this year.
Thank you, Eric. It's good to be here.
We have candidates with us: Jamie Lopeman running on the Republican ticket, Dave Snow running on the Democrat ticket, and Thomas Owens running on the running as an independent, I should say. We drew numbers at the beginning. They will introduce themselves in that order. Jamie, pick number one.
Thank you, Eric. I'm Jamie Lopeman. I'm your Republican mayoral candidate. I'm a lifelong resident of Richmond, Indiana. I have served my first term as a Richmond Common Council member. I was a city council president in 2018. I'm married to my wife, Cindy. Just recently celebrated our 20th anniversary. I have two children, Owen 17 and Claire 13, both members of Richmond Community Schools. And I've worked most of my life outside of the city of Richmond. I've worked for small-owned businesses and Fortune 500 companies, managed up to 600 indirect employees and 10 direct employees. Also managed budgets as big as $160 million. I look forward to serving you in the future.
Thomas.
I'm Thomas Owens. I'm an independent candidate for mayor of Richmond. I'm a lifelong resident as well. I've spent the past 15 years running my business. I'm also a veteran and an investor in our community. After talking to people from both major parties this spring about possibly running for office, I decided with the political divide that we have that running as an independent would be the best way to actually make a difference for us, and that's why I'm running.
Okay. Dave.
Thank you. Mayor Dave Snow, and it's been a true pleasure and an honor to serve as your mayor for the past 4 years. I do want to start by thanking Eric and thanking Brian for hosting this forum for us. It gives us an opportunity to talk through the issues we face. When I ran for mayor in 2015 and I was out in the neighborhoods knocking on doors through my campaign, I would talk with excitement with residents all over the city about our future as a community, but we would talk about the hurdles that we saw in the way. Hurdles in our infrastructure. We had roads in high disrepair. We had a hospital standing that needed to come down. We had an understaffed police department. And so we set out to break down some of those barriers, to open up a wider pipeline to our success. And that's what we've done. So tonight we're going to talk about some of those successes and the momentum that that's set for our future goals. And I'm really excited to do that with you. So thank you for having us.
All right. We're going to ask you to keep your answers generally in the neighborhood of 2 minutes, but as we've said before, this is a conversation. So if you need to come back, just kind of wave your hand or something at me. I'll come back around. This forum is not about getting you to make all kinds of crazy promises about things that may or may not be part of the mayor's office. But it is about providing enough specific information that the electorate can make a decision as to who they think can best run the city. In 76 days, it could be sunny and 55, or it could be 15 cloudy with 10 inches of snow falling down. Whichever one of those weather forecasts holds, you and the people that you select, we will expect are going to take care of it. So if you can provide us with some specifics about what your plans are and what your thoughts are for the city, that will help us make an informed decision. Let's start off. We're going to go starting this way, and we'll start with Dave since Jamie started first. And the question really is pretty simple. Why do you want to be mayor?
Oh, that is a simple question, but complex. So I chose my entire career here in Richmond. I love this city. I've been very passionate about Richmond my entire adult career and my entire adult life. In my career in broadcasting, I chose that career because it served the community. I spent many late nights delivering thunderstorm warnings or snowstorm alerts, and took that passion and started building community events to make our community stronger. Created City Fit, created City Life, the Fireworks 5K, got very involved with the Richmond City Fireworks, and wanted to continue to build on that community development background and that passion, that unending passion that I have for Richmond and the people that live here. These are the people that raised me. I owe everything in my life to the way I've been raised here in Richmond. So I stepped up to serve the community as mayor. And over the last 4 years, I've learned a tremendous amount. What a learning experience this is. And so you've made the investment in me to serve as your mayor. We've accomplished a lot of goals in that amount of time, and we're setting out on a pretty heavy agenda to get a lot more done in the next 4 years. That's why I'm asking for your support and asking for the opportunity to continue what we've started, to keep checking off the success boxes as we go along.
So I've always been interested in politics and having conversations around politics. Basically, after the primary election left us with two candidates that have been in office for the last 4 years, basically representing our whole city, I felt the citizens needed another option. There has been a call for change. People have talked about being left behind and not being heard, and I feel that they should be. Also, as a business owner and an investor in our community, I've got a horse in this race. I really do. I've spent 15 years running a business, building clients and relationships with people. I've spent close to 12 years investing in properties, and at this point, I'm kind of scared of my investment. After 5 years of owning my fire station, I had it reappraised, and it was worth $5,000 less than when I bought it. After putting $30,000 into it, not counting the time, just money. So, I'm really scared for my investments, and we need to turn it around and make Richmond go the other way and hopefully start growing again.
So you heard earlier that I've always kind of worked out of town, but I've always chose to make Richmond my home. And that's what I want. I want my children to have the opportunity to call Richmond their home as well. Being on council has afforded me a behind-the-scenes look at some of the issues that face our city. And I think I'm the person that can help move the city in the right direction so that they have the opportunity, not only my children, but everybody else's children, to call Richmond their home moving forward.
Right.
Good evening, gentlemen. It's good to be here with you. And my first question, I think it's going to be fairly simple, hopefully for you to answer. But again, as you mentioned a moment ago, these answers do get complex. But I'd like to talk about the job description of the mayor. And when I think about your most basic roles as the mayor, first of all, you're charged with setting policies and initiatives that basically give us, the residents of this community, the vision for tomorrow. And then secondly, you allocate resources. So when I think about the job description, to me that covers the broad brush items, but I'd like for you to fill in the blanks. Tell me what you see your job description as mayor is, because that really tells us what you find to be most important and what you want to bring to the mayor's office.
I'll start with me. Not being mayor, I would have to say that running the departments is by far the number one job, making sure that you have the right people in line that can take care of all the things that we need to take care of. That's by far the most important thing. You know, there's plenty of boards and committees to sit on to where you can talk to people and hopefully make policy and push agendas, but point blank, the running the city departments, overseeing the city departments and making sure that they're led by the right people is by far the most important.
Obviously, number one is always going to be public safety. You have to ensure public safety. You also have to make sure that the essential services are met to ensure that the things that the citizens can't provide for themselves are taken care of. And lastly, you have to work within the communities to develop a place of quality. That starts with communication, that starts with getting their feedback so that you can plan for the future.
So I can tell you, after serving as mayor for almost 4 years, the complexity that is the position of being mayor. There are several buckets that a mayor must work on each day. I would say the first and overall is that the mayor is the primary cheerleader of the city. That is always top of the list. A mayor believes in his or her hometown and always cheerleads for that community, those people, and those opportunities. So leading with positive vision is really very, very important. Then we get into surrounding yourself with the right experts that can run all the different departments and report back to you and get all the tasks done. So then you're appointing a park superintendent, sanitation superintendent, a street commissioner. Then you have over 50 board and commission appointments to make sure that all of your Parks Board, Aviation Commission are all functioning properly. But then you also have to make sure you're managing your partnership. The mayor is a partner to so many community organizations, nonprofits, other community leaders, and you have to act as a partner and a conduit, both from your role and in the other roles that you facilitate from the mayor's office. And then last but not least is being there for the citizens. So when you're juggling all of that in your schedule, but someone comes in and says, I would like to talk to the mayor for a few minutes, you have to make yourself available for that as well. So it's a multi-layered role of cheerleading, setting a vision, setting goals, managing the departments, and being there and being able to work with the citizens one-on-one.
There's an old phrase that goes in leadership, you have to have double vision. You have to obviously promote the positive, but you also have to be able to look at the negative as well and deal with those issues. And some of those issues are very tough conversations, and that is also a huge factor in a role for the mayor.
Okay. You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WCTV Channel 11. We have questions from you that we are going to get to, and we'll sometimes bring those in even before Brian and I get to ask our questions. So if you've got questions, again, 973-8587. You can comment on Facebook, ask a question there, or you can ask a question through Twitter. Let's see if we can get one of the first ones up. I think we've got 2 or 3 behind where we are already right now. Some Richmond citizens feel disenfranchised because the downtown area and Depot District get a lot of attention. Other areas of Richmond face more important issues such as blight, poverty, and ongoing drug activity. As mayor, how would you address these concerns? And have you visited those areas and spoken with any of those residents? Jamie, we're around to you to start.
Thank you. Obviously, it's going to start with getting that communication back from the neighborhoods. They have to feel like the neighborhoods have to feel like they're part of the solution and part of the collaborative to have the discussion. Obviously, I've been going to schools and listening to kids, and kids have been telling me my neighborhoods aren't safe. That just hurts your heart to hear that. So what do? You talk to the children and you say to them, look, I hear your concerns. I'm going to put a plan together, but I'm also going to work with you. As far as other issues in the neighborhoods, obviously it's going to take a Herculean effort. Not one person can solve this. It's going to take a collaborative. But somebody has to start those conversations. And have I been in those neighborhoods? Absolutely. I talked the other night, I was in the north 12th, 13th, 14th area. I stepped over a heroin spoon. I saw a needle on the ground. This is not good. People on the street were telling me about their situations. We have to do better.
So when we talk about this, it's a multifaceted issue. Jamie pointed out the strengthening of neighborhoods. We've put a lot of effort into neighborhood strengthening. We have a very active neighborhood services clearinghouse. I've made a mini grant program available to strengthen neighborhoods, and that's been a growing program, and our neighborhoods are coming together. That's important in the community strengthening. I think what the post might have alluded to is economic development as well, because we have a lot of conversations about economic revitalization through downtown and the depot. But of course that spreads citywide, and of course we address that. So first of all, I'm a West Sider, so I care very much about the economic development of the West Side. I had many conversations with the developer that had the former county market building that was for sale for a long time, who was trying to find the right tenant for that. We had a lot of conversations about how that development could progress that would really benefit the West Side, and I'm very protective of our grocery on the West Side because we need to preserve that as well. I was raised on the South Side, and so as I'm out traveling the city, I'm very passionate about the West Side. I just spent last weekend knocking doors up on North Richmond. These areas are all very important as we look at our future. So first and foremost, as we talk about the neighborhoods that have fallen into disrepair, that's one of the core reasons that we created the Code Enforcement Department and the Neighborhood Mini Grant Program. Code Enforcement is out there cracking down on the dilapidated structures, the unkempt properties, because we got to clean these areas up to prime them for economic revitalization. That's one of the impetus reasons behind creating that department. And then we look at repairing sidewalks, repairing curbs, repairing streets. These are the essential foundations to priming an area for economic revitalization as we move forward. And so, of course, all areas of the city are very, very important. I think you hear downtown in the Depot District come up more because it's right at the heart of Richmond. So you're going to hear a lot of conversations about the heart of the city, but the entire city is important in how we're growing and changing. One last thing, we're progressing right now through the final stages of our 10-year master plan. We've compiled a lot of input on that, and I have a feeling we'll end up talking more about that in this forum. But that will also guide our growth over the next decade moving forward, and that's citizen-driven from citizen input, so that's going to help us as well.
So I grew up on the South Side. I still live on the South Side. I understand people's concerns when it comes to we don't see anything going on here. You know, the grocery store's gone. It's not coming back. Those are issues, but, you know, that comes, you know, the grocery store comes down to business. You know, somebody's got to want to buy that and put something in place there. As far as people being disenfranchised, I think that really comes to communication. I think that if a lot of people really understood why we're concentrating so much on the downtown right now, and you know, this question was just brought up with the council at large, and I think Ron really, he kind of nailed it. You know, if you feel disenfranchised, pick up the phone and call. You know, we have representatives that you know, they're ready to listen to you, but we really need to reach out and try to let people understand why we're doing what we're doing. You know, the depot, there was money put into that. You had a lot of private business that put a lot of their own money into that, and it became very, very successful. It's one of the top places in Richmond, and I think that's the idea with downtown at this point, is to try to do the same thing there, and then with the connectivity with the bike path, you know, we'll have one big thing that hopefully will draw much more to our community. But I think that a lot of people miss the idea that there's a huge idea behind that because they're just not being told.
If I could we expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, and I've got a follow-up too, so
Okay.
go.
No, I think Thomas makes some good points, and I'm passionate about when you talk about that revitalization on the South Side. I mean, your business there in the fire station, your neighbors with my grandmother, who lives not even.
Yeah, we met.
Have you met? Okay, good. So when you talk about that and communicating with those neighborhoods and sparking that, how do you dive deeper into that? What's the plan, and how do you bring them together? How do you get my grandmother to communicate better with you as the mayor about the revitalization of that area?
So, as the mayor, it would be tough to go beat on doors and actually try. I mean, there's too much ground to cover there. You know, my one idea was doing the monthly discussion groups where we just, you know, once a month, you know, we get together. Anybody that's interested, if you actually want to be involved in the planning process, if you want to have a say in what's going on, or if you just want to gripe about something, then that's your opportunity to do that. But then also, anything that's going to be coming up or talked about or planned or anything like that, that'll be part of the conversation. That way people are going to be more informed. Another thing we can do to inform people more on what we're doing is possibly print an extra extra page to put in our sanitary bill. You know, that's ours. You know, we send those bills out every single month. What would it cost to put another piece of paper in there for a monthly newsletter? That doesn't go to every single home. Well, it goes to every home, but you know, like apartment buildings, we'd have to ask those people, hey, can you make copies of these, include them in your newsletter? Most apartments send out newsletters to their residents. But that way people are more informed as far as what's going on in Richmond for the next month. That would be a scheduled day for sure on every single month, just as council is. But to actually get the information out to people other than, I look at the internet, I read the paper, but there's a lot of times that I don't even know, as you're running for mayor, you know, what's going on all the time. So, you know, having something that's set out there that everybody's going to get, you know, you have to pay your bill eventually.
Eventually. Yeah.
And I think we're talking about being disenfranchised. I think that there's been enough cases where people have voiced publicly that they have reached out and heard nothing back. Emails, calls, different departments, even the administration. Let's just be honest about it. I have a situation right now where I have a lady on 11th Street who's complaining about an infestation. I've sent multiple emails. She's even followed up. She hasn't heard from anybody. It's been 10 days. I just checked with her today. Has anybody come to see you? No. So when you talk about disenfranchising people, it starts with the basics of communication. When they do reach out, you have to answer.
You mentioned the code enforcement department. I want to backtrack to that because there was some serious pushback from council last year during last year's budgeting cycle when that was proposed. It's there, it's up, still trying to figure out the funding and what they need. And this is for each one of you. Will the code enforcement department continue under your administration?
So first things first, we've always had code enforcement. We just gave it a title. That's what we need to understand. My understanding is there was literally 300 to 400 citations that were not processed through the legal department. And so did we need to create a new department based on lack of management? I don't think so. I think that we need to take a hard look at it and see if it's really a necessary department or could it be folded back into the sanitary district where the natural tools reside.
Now, you've looked at the budget. You've been on council. You've looked at the budget. Is that something that you will continue as mayor?
If you put me on the spot, I probably would not, but code enforcement would still be part of the city government.
Okay.
It just wouldn't be its own title.
Fair enough.
So when I hear Jamie talk about that, it's very confusing. In my time as mayor, as we've had discussions about the budget, we've often had discussions which have sometimes come from Jamie as a councilman about sanitation spending down some of the money they have. And those conversations have come in many paths. There was interest in looking at selling the landfill as a resource. There was interest in rebating ratepayers because of the money that sanitation has and collects in their user fees. So we've taken that money and invested it in cleaning the city up through code enforcement. Saying there's always been code enforcement, but it wasn't managed. When you go back to the code before we created the department, the person who was in charge of that was the sanitation engineer. So I guess my question that I have not had an opportunity to ask Jamie would be, if you go back to that, who do you assign to go out and write the citation and clean up the mess when the code pointed to the sanitation engineer? Because it was that ambiguous language that led to this creation.
So my question would be back to you is how did we do it all these years and do it effectively?
And I would say it didn't get done. That's why there was trash all over the alleys and the sidewalks. So we made the investment out of the sanitation department to fund the code enforcement department, to create a chief code enforcement officer. Derek Hill has the authority to write the citation and facilitate getting the mess cleaned up. And going back to trash on the sidewalks and in the alleys, and back to conversations about better ways that sanitation can utilize the funds they have from the fees they collect, seems like a huge step in the wrong direction. When we've taken almost 70 tons of trash from the sidewalks and the alleys through code enforcement. It's been highly resourceful, highly useful. We've written several citations that some have gone through the court system. We've won all of those. We're really showing that we're serious. And so Derek has facilitated the boarding up of abandoned properties, which he can now refer to Unsafe Building Commission, and we're budgeting in 2020 for demolition costs. And we plan to still add on this and grow on it because there's a lot more that we can do from this department. So it's been very successful. I'm driving around, I'm seeing less trash. We still have some problems, and we're addressing those. But going back to seeing the trash again, It's often been said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results. And it clearly wasn't working before, so putting it back would just take us the wrong way.
It's kind of a misnomer. See, we're getting rid of it. We're not getting rid of it. What we're talking about here is fault and responsibility. Ultimately, when you're talking about management, who's responsible? For the city, it would be the mayor. So for the 3 years that we didn't have it, where was the responsibility? It wasn't his fault, but he was responsible. So when you have these situations where you're not having citations processed and it's not getting done, you have to go back to the person at the top because they're responsible.
Okay.
Okay.
I know you probably want to come back, but we're going to go to you. Obviously,
great.
code enforcement came in. The code enforcement department came
absolutely.
into being
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
Is that something that you would continue as mayor?
Absolutely. We made a huge investment in that department. I think it's imperative that we at least let it go a little bit and see how productive it's going to be. Make sure that we're not wasting money. I do know that we dropped the ball on code enforcement for a few years while we were doing the blight elimination. That stacked up a lot. 5 years ago, I got a citation for somebody spray painted on one of my garages. I had to take care of that. So we had code enforcement then. It wasn't as big as what it is now, but we had code enforcement. But it is a new program. It has a lot of new employees and a lot of new parts and pieces to it that we need to see how it works out. And I think that just changing course on it immediately would be a bad idea. I think that we ought to give it the time to at least make sure that it is effective. Get cleaned up what we've let pile up for a few years. Once we get that cleaned up, then we'll see how heavy we are as far as code enforcement. Maybe we don't need quite as much into that as what we do right now because we're playing catch up. As far as giving it to the sanitary, I'm not so sure about that. I go to the landfill quite often, and I got to say, I'm not sure that they take care of the code enforcement. I don't know if you go to the landfill very often, but it's chaos.
I do.
Yeah, it's chaos.
I was actually there the other day and watched 7 Ohio trucks dump trash and didn't even go through the gates.
Honestly,
Just didn't go
yeah.
through the checkpoints.
You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We're speaking with candidates running for Mayor of Richmond: Thomas Owens, Dave Snow, Jamie Lopeman. We're going to get a question from Brian, and then we're going to get a couple of questions in from you.
Okay, there's been a lot of discussion around the food and beverage tax. This is a discretionary tax. I don't know if I'll get an exact answer if I were to say, are you in favor of the food and beverage tax, yes or no? I'm not sure where you would land on that. So rather than posing that question, let me put it to you this way. What program, what initiative can you envision that you would say, if this is the initiative, I would like to institute the food and beverage tax so that we can capitalize on that revenue. What does that program look like so that you would then say, I'm in favor of food and beverage?
Thomas, I think we're starting with you on this one.
So I'm not really sure that I understand the question. What?
Okay, let me put it this way. If we were to institute the food and beverage tax in Wayne County, or specifically in this case in Richmond, that would generate revenue. It's a 1% tax on the food and beverage, so it's a discretionary tax. If you go to a restaurant, obviously
Sure.
it's 1%. So we've had the opportunity to exercise this right from the state for over 30 years, but our county, our city has not taken advantage of that. So my question is, what would you do with the revenue if we had food and beverage? So what program, what initiative, what project would you get behind to expend revenue that was generated from the food and beverage?
Multiple answers you can give to that. So initially I would say to the EDC tourism. I mean, that's what makes sense because that's what we're supposed to be capitalizing on, that tax is the tourism. But if we had to pick a project, then that could be any number of things, something as far as development in the Old Reed Hospital area, or I mean, any number of things that's going to be a large investment over a period of time. But just broadly speaking, I'd say to the EDC and tourism to bring those dollars back.
Okay, so then you would be saying that there would be a program or an initiative, a project that could exist that you would then say, yes, I am in favor of food and beverage.
Okay, so I would only be in favor of a food and beverage tax if we put it on the ballot. I don't think that's something that I should decide as mayor, that the council should decide as a council. You know, if it goes to the county, I don't think it's something that the county council should be deciding either. I think that's why we have that line on the ballot to where we can ask questions.
Jamie?
And obviously, I wouldn't be the guy who decided that as mayor. The reality is that it can only be used for, like he spoke on, redevelopment or tourism. I actually sat down with Mary Walker the other day and had a discussion about it to try to get up to more speed on it. I do know there was a prospectus that was sent out there that had education put into it, but that's not going to happen. That can't be part of it. I understand there's both sides of this. There's approximately $1.275 million out there that we could use. And I also understand it's also a strain on some of our lower income families in the city. So is there a project out there right now? Not right now. I'm not in favor of it. I'm not in favor of taxing our citizens any further. But I will tell you this, if it did come to fruition and it went through the council and got support from the state legislative, I would want to make sure that there are great controls in place so that it's not used as a slush fund.
I want to come back to that here in just a second. But when we talk about the food and beverage tax, it's one of the many tools that's been given to us by the Indiana legislature as we combat property tax caps, which just in Richmond alone has a $3 million impact on our 2020 budget. It's a huge impact, the property tax caps. The food and beverage tax is usually presented as what many call the penny tax, because it's a cent on the dollar on prepared foods only, and then is often also referred to as a pass-through tax, because it passes through and then is collected, and then there's a commission set up that has to oversee the projects and the spending at hand. The proposal that was given to the county, kind of think of it as a pie chart with different slices. The way that was presented, it did include an education piece, which I do think could be included in an overall projection for the food and beverage tax. I think there were objections to that because those were last dollars in, and there are many, many other programs that are available as last dollars in for students that are pursuing college. So I think it would be more beneficial if someone was to bring a proposal forward that was more project-based and put a lifespan to the tax, and it gave its biggest benefit to public safety and or infrastructure. If there was a project at hand that would benefit public safety, infrastructure, and possibly even tourism to attract people to our city that had a lifespan, and then the food and beverage tax paid for that project and expired when the project was paid for, I'd be interested in hearing that. But ultimately, it's a decision of our city council because that is our legislative body. And Jamie, you had said you work with the Indiana legislature to make sure there were controls in place, but I don't understand that. I just want to make sure I understand.
That's not what I said.
Okay, I'm sorry. Would you say it again?
I said I would want to make sure that there are controls in place that we were tracking the dollars.
Okay. I was just curious how that works.
You just track it.
I mean the controls. When council passes this, if they were to pass the food and beverage tax, how would the mayor create a system of controls?
I think it's kind of similar to your redevelopment fund that you have right now, which shows about $4 million in it that is approved by boards that are the appointments of the mayor.
Correct. Is that something else you would address as mayor, is changing the legislation on redevelopment commission?
Well, I think what I would do is I would have a better understanding, but I will say this up front. My goal is to also bring the city council back into the decision-making process for the finances of Richmond.
Now, I'm so glad you brought that up because we talked about that at Kiwanis, and I find that a confusing statement as well because council is the financial arm of the city. They have the final say-so in the acceptance and appropriation of the entire budget. So how would you give them more financial control?
You're taking my role.
I'm sorry. This is a question I wanted answered because I heard this question heard the statement previously.
Fantastic. So right now we approve a budget, as you well know, and then there's a group of a sum of money that is put out there. Okay. Then that money is appropriated by project, correct? And that is by appointed board, correct? That is not a.
You're talking about redevelopment commission specifically
correct,
now, not the entire budget.
Correct.
Redevelopment commission.
Correct. So then what happens at that point? Tax dollars are appropriated by a non-elected official.
So in the TIF district, which collects the redevelopment dollars, the redevelopment commission, by appointment in their seats, has the ability to pass through the assessed value of the TIF district to lower the amount that they collect. So would you ask redevelopment to pass through AV, or would you just lobby for the legislation to change to give council the appropriation control over that? There are several statutory provisions which lay out that council has final review, but it gets a little confusing as to acceptance and appropriation. So, and I guess the reason I get curious about this is if your goal was for council to have appropriation rights over redevelopment commission and TIF dollars, that was not something you lobbied for from council. That would be a great council agenda as running for a council person. But as mayor, switching to the executive role, then you would want to lobby that the council, the statutory provisions should change in such that council should have appropriation rights, or would you just lobby to have redevelopment commission pass through assessed value? And then at what amount? Because that's an important piece to this.
So I would lobby to change the legislation. But here's the deal. Right now, you see it every day. I'm sure you're aware of it. We get beat over the head for decisions that are made, and we are viewed as the financial arm of government.
Because you are, yes.
Because we are,
Yes.
until a point. And as soon as we approve it, then it goes off and a commission makes that decision. I don't think that's correct.
So you would lobby to the Indiana legislature to change the statutory provisions to include the words acceptance and appropriation,
Yes.
to change the way redevelopment commissions are handled throughout the state. Okay.
So to lay that down to where everybody understands that at home, you're approving a large amount of money that goes to appointed people to spend, basically.
Right.
I watched the
Sure.
budget meeting and heard about all that stuff, and I wasn't aware of that. I'm with you. I kind of, I mean, you're signing a blank check.
That's right.
It's like the miscellaneous line items. That's kind of a blank check. There are some things that do need to be in place for that, because there's always going to be something that comes up. But that large of a blank check, when you are the one that's going to be held responsible, you are the one that's going to get beat over the head
That's
when
correct.
somebody says, well, why are we doing this? And you approved the money. Well, you did approve the money, but you didn't approve it on a specific item, on a specific project.
Correct.
And so just to break it down, I mean, that was very confusing to me just listening to that. So,
Yeah.
but I happened to watch that and got the breakdown in the meeting. So it was quite interesting.
You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. I can just leave the room if you want. We're speaking with candidates running for Mayor of Richmond, Dave Snow, Thomas Owens, Jamie Lopeman. We have questions from you backing up, so we're going to get a couple of those in and then come back to Brian. So let's get the first of these up. What are some essential qualities that define a great leader? Give an example of a living person you admire who exemplifies these qualities. What are some essential qualities that define a great leader? Can you give us a living person you admire who exemplifies these qualities? Jamie, I think we're with you on this one to start.
Well, obviously, a leader leads by example. If you say you're going to do it, you do it. And that allows people to see that you're genuine. Also, too, there has to be this level of engagement that shows that you care and you're empathetic. I'll just give you a local name that I really admire. That's Clay Miller. If you take the time to talk to Clay Miller, he will listen to you. He will try to give you the best example possible to resolve an issue. And I consider him not only a friend, I consider him a mentor in a lot of ways.
Qualities that define a leader. Asset-based thinking outside the box, positivity, vision, compassion, strong work ethic. That's a big question. Talking about the people that I look up to with those qualities, I'm not going to embarrass a lot of the people that I could mention. The people I look up to the most are local people. There are people in the community that show a real tenacity. And that I really admire the way that they just persevere through all the bad things that face them in life. I'm not going to embarrass them. But I will willingly embarrass my own parents, who I look up to very much. My father is a very hardworking guy. He's worked in the same local factory for almost 40 years. I got my work ethic from him, banging on my bedroom door at 8 o'clock in the morning on Saturdays and getting me out of bed and making me mow the lawn and help him with a car. Drove me nuts when I was a teenager. I appreciate it now looking back. And my mother, who put herself back through school at almost 40 to become a nurse, and then spent a good 20-year career as a nurse in Richmond. So I learned a really strong work ethic from my father and how to care about people from my mother. And That's two great things to learn from great parents. And so I'll embarrass them, but I won't embarrass anybody else. But great question. Thank you.
So I have to agree with Dave and Jamie. So many different responses there. Beyond that, I think a great leader is somebody that's willing to listen to anyone, but somebody that won't be led by bad ideas and is willing to make tough calls, even if it's not the popular call.
Anybody you want to?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Okay. Next question up. We're going to get at least 3 of these. During the Hype Richmond debate, Jamie Lopeman said 2 generations of apathy have hit this town. Why do you agree or disagree with that statement? And if you do, what do we do to change that mindset? What do you think of the last 2 generations? I'm going to go here. Dave?
Is it me? I think quite highly of the last 2 generations, and I'll be very honest. That comment at the debate hurt me a bit. I think about my hardworking father, and I think about my grandfather who was at Pearl Harbor. And so hearing that we have 2 generations of apathy that have led to problems in this town, as mayor and as someone that grew up in Richmond and worked as a broadcaster and worked as a community development guy, with hundreds of volunteers in this community and other people that just only cared about making Richmond better. To then stand on a grand stage and look at those people and say, well, this is your fault. You've apparently been too lazy to get us moving. That hurts me deeply to hear comments like that, because that's not the case. This is a very hardworking city full of very hardworking and passionate people that care very much about their causes and their neighborhoods. And so I didn't like that statement at all. This is a great city, full of great people, and these are the people that raised me. I owe everything in my life to this city and the opportunities that it's afforded me that I honestly often feel like I have never deserved, but you've afforded me those, and I appreciate it. So I think a lot of the last 2 and even 3 generations, and I think that there's a lot of potential that we're working to unlock in positivity and community development to help everyone feel that they can rise to their own personal potential when the city is rising around them. And so that's part of my goal every day, is to lead with positivity, lead with cheerleading this city. And I've heard plenty in my life that I'm not good enough. I feel like somebody's always had that to say to me in all of my roles, from community development up to being mayor. And I feel like you out there, you've probably heard that too. And you should never hear that from your mayor. You should never hear a community leader look at you and say you're still not good enough, because you are good enough. And we all have a lot of potential together, and I just want us to all feel that and keep moving forward.
I have to agree. I mean, in the last few generations, we've had a lot of great people come out of this community. I think we do need to work on our unity a little bit and get more motivated to be a part of what we're doing. But, to say that it's just 2 generations' fault why we are where we are, I don't think that's quite fair.
So quite the narrative there that was just given. But the reality is we talk about blight. We talk about the drugs. We talk about the lack of workforce, qualified workforce. Mm-hmm. It all plays into this. He's absolutely correct. There is a portion of our city that is fantastic. They will donate their time, they will work, they're community involved, and there's a portion that's not. And we need to address that portion. I said earlier, being a leader, being a mayor is double vision. You can sit here and you can talk about all the great things in the world, but if all this negativity and all these things are happening behind it and you're not willing to address it and have those tough conversations, because that's why I said it. We need to have those tough conversations. Look at the generational poverty in this town. Look at the 48%, I think it's 40%, 48% is living in poverty right now. It affects us every aspect of our life, and we have to address that. So when I made that comment, it was a comment to ensure that I will not just focus on this positive over here. I'm willing to address the negative as well.
May I ask a follow-up? You said
This is a conversation.
You said generational poverty. Do you believe poverty is self-inflicted?
No, but I will tell you this. Go to schools. Go to schools.
I spend a lot of time in schools.
I'm sure you do. But listen to the kids who tell you stories where they haven't slept on a bed and they're 14 years old.
I get it. Those are terrible stories. But you said 2 generations of apathy. Apathy is a decision. or a lack of making a decision to do better, and you relate that to poverty. So is poverty just not having the gumption to get out there and get yourself out of it?
So what happens is then as we get into subsidies and assistance, it makes more sense to stay in those worlds. And that's what helps create and perpetrate the generational poverty.
Okay. Brian?
Okay, I want to come back to not just food and beverage, but the manner in which revenue is generated. One tool that you have is the edit tax. So what do you see as a good initiative, good programs to invest in utilizing the edit dollars that are available to you as mayor?
I have to say I'm fairly unfamiliar with that, so that's something I'd have to research to give you a good answer on.
Obviously, we talk about downtown a lot. We have opportunities there to invest those dollars downtown. We also have those opportunity to invest in new business and gaining new business. That would be my focus for edit dollars.
Yeah, our economic development income tax has been a topic for quite a while. When I came in as mayor, I didn't feel as though every dollar of that was being used strictly to tie to economic development, so I tightened the reins on that quite a bit. We've made a conscious effort over the last 3.5 years to really tie those dollars strictly to economic development. We use those dollars for our trips to Japan. We have 5 Japanese-owned businesses, and it's very important to foster those relationships. But it's also important to point out that we sign an agreement on a regular basis with the county to fund some of those economic development income tax dollars into the consolidated edit fund, which sits on the county side, and then funds the EDC. And so that partnership plays a big role, and how we acquire land in the industrial park is one of the uses that we can look into the consolidated edit fund and the upgrades to the infrastructure in there to make it shovel ready. So there's a robust array of uses that we can pull from that, but I've put a big emphasis on tying them directly to economic development in my time as mayor.
So as a follow-up, do you believe that we should continue to fund the EDC through our the city edit?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Our portion, absolutely.
Jamie?
Yes.
Okay. There was a topic brought up last week that I think those of you who want to lead the administration should answer. What do you see as the issues with Richmond's public transportation system, and how can they be addressed?
Well, there's definitely a gap for paratransit. It's hard for paratransit users to schedule, doctor's appointments a month in advance and try to get that time, so it's pretty tight. Obviously, I think that the transportation system, the bus system, is underused. There's an opportunity there. Maybe it's just promotion. But we also have to look at what is the next 30 years going to look like. We focus now, but in the future, we're going to have autonomous cars. How's the city going to tie into that? How are we going to move people in the future is not just a now conversation, it's a future conversation.
There's a lot of potential with our bus system. Our bus director, Terry Quinter, is so passionate about her position and all of our bus drivers. So we budgeted in the 2020 budget for an additional driver, and we're purchasing an additional bus. We've had conversations to lay the groundwork for a bit of an overhaul. I think it's about time for a new name to our Roseview Transit, a rebranding, if you will. There are definitely some routes that can be updated. If we're able, through the budget, we rely heavily on federal funding for our public transit. If we're able to, through budgeting, adding more evening hours, and I would really like to see the design and implementation of a school/work route. We have people in the city that would benefit tremendously from getting to the northern campus that is Purdue Polytechnic, Ivy Tech, and IU East. And so if we can help people navigate to that campus through our bus system, we would be doing them a great service, getting them to educational opportunities. So that's something that we've had discussions about and we're talking about, but taking those baby steps and adding a driver, adding a bus, we're trying to get there. I want to add one more thing. I met with some students from Earlham who are part of Gene Hambrick's Innovation in Business class, and they proposed a wonderful concept that would add a digital system to our bus. Our transit system, where you could open up an app and see where all the buses are and then call for your bus from the app. It was genius. And these are the students that created bus systems overseas and have won awards for their ingenuity and their work. And so working with those students has been very inspiring. So as we get into our next budget cycle and see more things that we can do, we'll definitely be having more of those conversations.
So I have to agree with Jamie and Dave on most all of those points. So the paratransit is something that we really need to look at. We have a large senior community here in Richmond. It's going to continue to grow, and that need is going to continue to grow as well. So finding ways to where we can add to the paratransit would be something that we really should be looking at. As far as the Roseview Transit, super underutilized. Every time I see the buses out, there's one or two people on the buses. So finding a way to promote people to use the Roseview Transit would be wonderful. Later hours is something I've heard about a whole lot. Sunday hours, people still get out on the weekends too, and so finding a way to make that happen would be something to look at too. But every bit of that costs money, and figuring out a way to do that is going to be tough.
Watching the InFocus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. We've got, I know we're still behind 2 or 3 at least chat questions, so let's get the next one up. How important is it to the candidates not to stand on a platform and back Republican or Democrat plans, but stand for what is best for the whole of Richmond? Okay, how important is it for you not to stand on a party platform, but to stand for what is best for the whole of Richmond? I think, Dave, we start with you on this one.
Oh, it's more than important, it's essential. There is absolutely no way you can function as mayor based on a political party playbook. It doesn't work that way. If you can't function in a bipartisan role and work with everyone equally, you can't be effective in the position at all. And I'm happy to say that the council we have today, I helped vote this council in. I'm a cross-ticket voter. I'm not a straight-ticket Democrat voter. I believe in who's best for the job, and we have seated Republican council people that I'm in favor of keeping on council. So I very much support who's best for the job, who's best for the city, the best projects that are for all of us. And we'll always work across all lines to get all that done. And we proved that with the hospital project. That took myself, 9 city council members, 7 county council members, and 3 commissioners. That's 20 different political backgrounds and political agendas, and we were all able to work together to get one project done. So we've proven that level of leadership, but it's essential in this office.
So as an independent, I don't think it's going to be a problem working with the other parties. I'm running for the citizens of Richmond, not for a party, but I don't think I'm going to have a problem at all to work with all different parties for common sense resolutions to our problems.
4 years ago, I told everybody to do their homework on everybody and always choose the best candidate. It still rings true today. And having worked in large corporations, so on and so forth, not everybody has the same perspective or beliefs in a lot of different things. And you have to learn to work with people, and you have to be able to present ideas and listen to their feedback genuinely, because that's where it starts. It starts with that genuine listening and providing that genuine input that makes things work.
Okay. Next question up. What is your personal opinion on the privatization of city services such as EMS, the landfill, etc.? If elected or re-elected, would you advocate privatization? Thomas.
So I think it would go down to what services we're talking about. So like with the landfill services, I had somebody tell me at a meeting that I was at about somewhere they live, wintertime home, that they actually bid on those projects every 6 months. The different companies bid on these services every 6 months. So you have really, really competitive rates going out for something like that, and you don't have the expense of actually operating. So something like that, you'd have to look at the facts and see how many of those services we actually have here. I'm not sure that we have enough services around the Richmond area to get multiple bids to do something like that. As far as EMS, I not a chance. As fast as Richmond Fire Department can show up, I don't think that you can put a price on a life, and to save a few bucks here or there to contract that out to somebody else, I think would be foolish.
So when we talked about the hospital, I threw this idea out of leasing, not selling. The landfill, and working in a way that we could potentially pay for the demolition of Old Reed. We caught a break along the way that Reed didn't cost $10 million, it only cost $4.5 million. And as soon as that number came up, conversation stopped. Because then it was manageable for the city. Privatizing like EMS and so on and so forth, no, not a chance. Once that went away, the conversation went away as far as the dollar amount, because I did not want our citizens to be impacted with that heavy financial burden. So I threw it up as an option.
Yeah, our asset, our landfill is an asset, and we definitely want to retain that asset. It's tremendous for our city and our budget. The landfill pays a pilot tax back to our general fund for their land, and then they pay into our street department to pick up all the leaves during fall so that they don't get into the sewer water lines. And so it tremendously benefits our budget having the landfill, owning the landfill, and operating it. When we talk about EMS, the program that's been put forth by our fire department to manage the EMS side has been very successful in funding our apparatus plans. A fire truck today with a ladder can cost $1 million. And so without this successful EMS plan and the very successful and very well thought out apparatus plan that's been put behind it, we wouldn't have been able to buy 2 fire trucks and the ambulances that we've purchased since I've been mayor. So we would definitely keep that intact moving forward.
Okay. And before we go back to Brian, we're going to get one more chat question, see if we can come close to catching us up, but somehow I think we're still behind. What is the one issue policy you would like to champion in the next 4 years if elected? What is the one issue or policy that you would like to champion in the next 4 years if you're elected?
I think
Jamie.
it's me. Might be. Yeah.
I'm being told in my ear, Jamie.
Okay, yeah, somebody's paying attention.
I'll go with the voice in my head.
It gets confusing.
Yeah. Actually, what I'd like to champion is building back building a workforce. I know that we lost one employer who's going into their 3rd expansion based on not being able to guarantee them a work-ready workforce. So that's something that I'm highly interested in. I've actually been working with the Boys and Girls Club and IB Tech to start a program which starts at the 2nd and 3rd grade levels to teach advanced aspirational learning, to teach problem solving, to teach teamwork, to teach simple soft skills. And that's going to start in January. So my focus would be, I really want to see us getting our workforce back to where it would be. And second would be obviously controlling the budget and making sure that we have balanced budgets.
I'm going to answer the question in twofold, because I think there are 2 key issues we want to face moving forward. The first would be a business revitalization program that we've been working on, where we can lean on Indiana Small Business Development Center in Center City to vet ideas for small business coming forward, and then utilize our revolving loan fund while we take those TIF dollars we were talking about earlier and stabilize some of the beautiful old buildings we have, not just in downtown, but around that entire area where we have some very old buildings. It's going to be difficult for us. Again, we talked earlier about doing the same thing and expecting different results. As we look at business revitalization, it's becoming harder and harder to say, Eric here wants to open up a shop where he makes handmade hats. So we want to put you in that shop, but you're going to have to update the sprinkler system, 2 methods of egress, you got to fix the floor. The money that you spend on that's probably going to prohibit you from putting your hats in the storefront. And we can't continue to rely on small business entrepreneurs to have the startup capital to stabilize the building and put their wares in the window. So we need to step in and play a bigger role, do some building stabilization, vet the small businesses through the Indiana Small Business Development Center, and then put the building itself into maybe the revolving loan fund, so that when you, Eric, want to sell your hats, instead of going for a capital loan, you would ask for the use of the building. After 3 to 5 years, if you're successful, you could buy that out and remain there. If not, the building would enter back into the revolving loan fund. I think that's a way that we can spark business revitalization on the small scale, which I think we have a responsibility to do. On the flip side of that, another thing that's been important to me through my first term and will continue in the second term is we are still working very hard to revitalize the Human Rights Commission and rebuild that. That's been a tremendous amount of work. I have a panel of people right now that are experts in this that are helping me because it's been very complicated. So those are 2 key initiatives you'll see, but there's a lot more. I could talk for 20 minutes straight, but those are 2 important ones that you'll see moving forward.
So all valid points, but the key issue that I would like to fix is the communication with our citizens. By communicating and sharing our ideas, hopefully we'll get the involvement that we want in our government, in our local government, and get the unity that we need in our community to make all this stuff happen. Most of these ideas are going to happen anyway. It's just a matter of pushing the envelope a little bit, but by getting people behind that, they might happen quicker and better.
Before we go to Brian for another question and back to some chat questions, everybody here to a certain extent has mentioned communication or lack thereof. We're going to come back around this way. What will you do differently to make communication better? What specifically do you believe is not happening that you can do if you're sitting in the mayor's office to make communicating with people better?
You just have to open that line. Like I said, the monthly discussion groups, that's not going to cost any more. It's nothing that. It's something that I could absolutely do without asking for permission as mayor. It's not going to cost any more money. It's going to take a few hours of my time and whoever else's time I have to drag to that meeting to answer the right questions from the last month's meeting just to make sure people are being addressed. But by opening that line of communication, I know the mayor's shop's quite busy, so you don't have as much time to have that door open and wait for people to just pour in and wear you out on different subjects. That can take time. I've had conversations where we get 2 hours in and we really haven't resolved anything, and I'm not even the mayor. So I can only imagine that gets hectic, but to actually open that line of communication with the people is the one way I plan to do that.
Oh, right here.
Yep, we're gonna.
So we've made a big investment in the communication pipeline coming out of the city now. When I came in as mayor, it became very apparent that some of the fundamental tools were not in place. So we made an investment in a brand new website, which we now have, which is far more robust than the former website. There you'll find all project updates, road closures, construction updates. You'll find online portals. If you see trash in the alleys or the streets, you can report that directly to code enforcement. It goes directly to Derrick Hill. You can find a community calendar on that site. We link away to Waynet. You can pay your sanitation bill. I mean, there's a much larger portal of information on the website than there was previously, and it's much easier to access. That's just one piece of it. We made an investment in a community development coordinator. Our first run at that wasn't as successful. We had to go back on the search for a new person to fill that position. Now Kate Coton is in that position and is doing a tremendous job. She attends all of the downtown business group meetings. She attends depot business group meetings. She gives updates at city council meetings. She manages our social media, so everything's always on your major social media platforms. And then she helps us with our press releases to get those out more fluid. So you've seen more press releases, you see more updates. And then I'm out in the community regularly talking to people, giving updates, also at council myself. But I will tell you, I was challenged by a local business owner, and I really appreciated this challenge. So we were having this discussion with some local business owners, and I mentioned all of that. And he was very frank with me and said, that's not good enough. And it kind of knocked me back for a minute. I thought, well, that's a lot. It's a lot of investment we've made. And he said, I think in 2019, I shouldn't have to come look for it. It's great that it's on social media. It's great that it's on the website. It's great that it's in the PAL item. It's great that I'm coming here and talking with you, Eric, for 90 minutes at a time and all of this, but it still requires me to look for it. In 2019, how does that come to me? And that really made me rethink this and think he might have a point. We are in an age where people expect the information to be delivered to them. And so maybe that's a fair expectation of your city government. So I've asked our team to look into the possibility, and right now we're just in an investigative phase of this, to add to the website the ability to sign up for email updates. So you could go to the site and you could say, here's my email address. When there are updates, put those out and they'll come to my email box. So then when we have projects and road closures and construction or anything, we can send that out as an email update. Now, I don't have a good handle yet on what that might cost, and that could end up being prohibitive to adding that. I hope it won't be, but we're already looking at the next layers of communication and how we can do more to not only put the information out, but put it directly in your hand.
So 2 points here. This has been the single biggest topic as I've talked to citizens and business owners. And it's not that it's not the social media point of it. It's just the simple basic tenets of communication. When I reach out, please respond. Please give me some feedback. That's their biggest complaint. So we're talking about the simple, easiest things in communication. the basics. Push technology is kind of what he's talking about here a little bit by having the email alerts. I talked about that back in January, pretty openly on my webpage. So, I mean, I agree. You've got to get back to the simple portion of it because that's the human aspect. And then when you need to get the mass alerts out, you do that by sending it to them.
So you're just, your way of making communication better is just return calls.
Return calls, emails, having department heads answer questions, having the workers actually interact with the people, because that is the biggest complaint I've heard.
Okay. You're watching the In Focus Candidate Forum on Whitewater Community Television's WGTV Channel 11. Jamie Lopeman, Dave Snow, Thomas Owens running for mayor for the city of Richmond, Brian Ballinger working with our partners, the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce. Next up.
I'd like to, in this next question, roll two different subjects together. We talk a lot about quality of life, quality of space. I hope we wouldn't disagree that that's an important factor. But as we think about employee attraction, employee retention, I'd like you to describe for me how you feel that quality of life and space is directly linked to attracting and retaining employees, because I think one of our challenges in the business world today is workforce development. Jamie, you touched on that. It's a very real problem. It's a factor that the business community is facing. So I'd like to know how you as mayor feel, or if you were mayor, how you feel about the importance of quality of life and space, and if you do feel that it's important, how do you address it? How do you allocate funds or initiatives and programs to confront that?
Dave.
Yeah, so when I first ran for mayor and I was out in the community, economic development and quality of place, quality of life, it continued to be an either-or discussion. It was economic development versus quality of life. And you learn as mayor that it's very much an and conversation and that they're one and the same. They're very joined. And so as we talk about those two issues together, I can give you a couple of very real-world scenarios. Just very briefly, I have a close friend who was just hired by an online e-commerce company and was headhunted out of her position for that. When she accepted that position and said, "Where will my new office be?" they informed her, "Wherever you want it to be. You can take the office with you digitally wherever you would like to go." That tells us a tremendous amount about our future economy and how people will now take their job with them and choose where they want to live and choose the community that they enjoy being a part of and where they want to raise their families and make their investments. And so that then points right back to our quality of place and quality of life issues. Another one would be, I recently sat down with a couple of our Japanese CEOs, again, to foster that relationship. And this was a local meeting. And their favorite place in Richmond was the Cardinal Greenway. They felt as though that was their place to go and clear their mind and come up with their best ideas and take walks. So it's these place initiatives. Whether we're connecting downtown and the Depot District, whether we're updating our parks, like through our Parks Bond, whether we're fixing sidewalks, curbs, and streets, these are things that are making our city more livable, which again points back to the importance of the Code Enforcement Department, taking down blighted properties, making our city look nice and attractive and prime for investment. Then people will choose to live here. And that's going to be very, very important in the next 10 years as more and more people can take their jobs with them.
I think we're well on our way as far as a lot of the initiatives the city's taken, all the things you were speaking about. I think the one thing that we can do to make our community more attractive is the simple things like smiling, saying hello. You know, I challenge people at the debates to introduce yourself to the person sitting next to you if you don't know them. You wouldn't believe how many people don't know their neighbors. So reaching out to people and actually being friendly is something that would actually make us stand out around all the communities around us. Just being a nice place, that's going to be super attractive to a lot of people.
So obviously working in a large manufacturer, we dealt with this real world, attracting employees of a younger generation who are wanting to choose to have flexibility and quality of place. Place of quality really starts with the neighborhoods, though. We're doing a lot of top-down government, in my opinion. We're telling the neighborhoods how things should look. We need to have that feedback from them, and we need as government to hear their feedback. We need to tell them what we can and can't do, and then we need to follow a plan. I watched the at-large forum a couple hours ago, and I was really watching it, and it was interesting. The conversation was, it seemed like all these areas have been neglected. Okay, we could focus on the depot and we could focus on downtown, and they're important. We also have issues on the west side. We have issues on the north end of Richmond. It's all a big picture, and we need to focus to ensure that we're not just hyper-focused on an area while the rest of the city falls behind. So quality of place, engagement from our community and our neighborhoods is vital.
And I'm thrilled to hear Jamie say that, because as we've opened up the neighborhood mini grant program, we've seen a lot of engagement from our neighborhoods. And we have a very active neighborhood services clearinghouse. And so they meet regularly, they come together, they share their ideas, and they're growing stronger. Actually, I attended one of the neighborhood meetings where 3 neighborhoods decided to come together in one large meeting to try to have a bigger impact. That was exciting. That was cool to see. And go ahead.
No, well, I know that there's been some $500 mini grants, and most have been for like community meet and greet, get together. I would propose that we do a $1,000 per neighborhood group so they could focus on issues like cleanliness and crime, like neighborhood watch systems. So we can take away those barriers of finance so that we can get that engagement as well.
That's interesting. So you would double the neighborhood mini grant program amount.
And no, it wouldn't be a mini grant, it would be an annual amount for each neighborhood. And then if they don't use it, then they could say, like a Reveston wouldn't use it, they could say, okay, we're going to give that to the Star District, and then the Star District can have a greater impact. And at the end of the year, if it's not used, it reverts back to the budget, and then we start over.
Just out of curiosity, your dollars, your $500 mini grants came from what?
I have taken those out of economic development, my LIT fund, local income tax fund.
Your $1,000 would come from?
The same.
Okay. We're about 4 questions behind on the chat questions, so we're going to go back to the questions that we have coming in. We are under 20 minutes, so let's keep going. How do you feel about the current bike trail and future phases of the project? How do you feel about the current bike trail and future phases of the project? Tommy.
I think it's nice looking, what we already have. It's nice looking. It's quite big. There's a lot of conversation around the bike trail. I think moving forward in the bike trail, we just need to make sure that we're paying attention to the business owners and making sure that we're going to do everything we can do to not lose any more business down in the depot area. But all the way around, I tell people all the time, maybe you should just consider buying a bike and trying it out. You might like it.
Okay. Jamie.
So obviously this has been the second biggest topic that I've been running into, and people have asked me, what's your plan moving forward? Obviously, for the depot, this is an example of top-down government. The depot district, the vast majority have said, we don't want it. But we're acting like we're going to, the plan is to continue on if he's reelected. I'm not in favor of continuing through the depot. What I am in favor of is cosmetically matching the rest of the downtown area, not getting into the big digging, making sure that it looks the same. We should be able to be in and out of there in a few weeks instead of months as we go through this process. We won't affect buildings. We have issues with buildings right now. Unfortunately, the city's in litigation over, and get it done. If you look right now, if phase 2, when phase 2 starts, you got 2+ years of mismatched area downtown. It's not a good look. We're talking about making things better and attracting business and doing this. I'm just not in favor of it. It's not that I don't want bike paths. I understand bike paths. Muncie has them. Everywhere I've been, they have them. This infrastructure was just not planned very well.
So going back to, we're going to unpack this a little bit. This is a public safety enhancement feature and a connectivity feature that the state invested heavily into the city of Richmond. And this goes all the way back to, my goodness, 2011, I think, if you go all the way back. As a citizen, I went to the citizen engagement meetings that were held at the Innovation Center, where we came in as citizens and put stickers on maps, and people were listening as everyone gave their input. And I remember some of those discussions back then were about people gathering at Clear Creek, people gathering at Glen Miller, and there being nothing in the middle. And with the promenade being taken out, the feeling was that downtown had lost its gathering place. And so from those discussions was born Elstro Plaza, connectivity paths, and the state saw a lot of value, and not only ours, but in other cities as well. So that led to inserting those plans into the Stellar City designation. We were designated a Stellar City in 2013 with those plans, with the intent that we would continue them and finish them. That's what the state looks for in both the Stellar City designations and the Stellar Regional, is not only the plans you have, your ability to complete them and your ability to expand on them. So embarking on those plans, that was all citizen-driven. We had a tremendous amount of citizen input. I say we as being a part of the local government now. Then I was just a citizen giving my input like everyone else. And what we had was citizen input that led to what we have today. And they are looking very nice. I agree with you, Thomas. They look great. And what we're seeing now is a lot of attention to the heart of our city because of those. We're seeing people come up and say, I see what's happening, I want to be a part of this. And we're taking an exciting turn, and it's moving us in the right direction. When we move into phase 2, government can't move that fast. Things take time. You have to go through a long array of checks and balances and approvals. So yes, there's a lull between the two, but it's good. It brings us a little stabilization between the two projects, so the barrels and the cones all clear out, and we just get the dust to settle for a while. I've been very, very clear as we plan phase 2, particularly in the depot, that it doesn't have to look anything like phase 1. And we've had several meetings where we've heard from business owners and those that will be on the loop that they say, well, you know, if it can look different, then this is better, and they've started providing their feedback. Those have been productive meetings. So when this is finished, it's going to be very exciting. It gives us a marketing tool. It's something that I talked about in my State of the City addresses that I gave here in the studio, that will have a marketing ability to say, come to Richmond and get in the loop. That's the heart of our city. That's where you connect to everything. And it's going to be amazing when it's finished. We just have to get there. So we'll get there.
So I said at a meeting the other night, and the question was asked, can the trail be narrower? And the answer was no, it can only be bigger. So I don't know how much we can really change in this process. That's why I think it's imperative that before we do this and potentially hurt or destroy the economic viability of a well-invested area like the depot, that has to be point blank written somewhere that this can be X and it doesn't have to be X. And that's the only way I could support that through the depot.
So you had said it could only be bigger?
Yes, that's what the actual conversation was at the lifted church the other night.
When you say bigger, are you saying wider?
The path is wider.
No, there's no requirement that it must be wider. There are width requirements that do come from NDOT. There's certainly no requirement that says it has to be wider than what you see now. Where I would say it gets confusing is that because NDOT does have width requirements on two-way traffic, but you can scoot the whole thing over and you can make a mixed-use lane. These were not built as mixed use. You have a very dedicated sidewalk. You have a dedicated two-way cycle track, right, is what they typically refer to that as at NDOT. If we build a mixed-use path, you change the width requirements, but there's certainly not a requirement that says it has to be wider than it is now. But as we were hearing the input from the people on that path, we're able to take that input and compile it into something that will ultimately look different than what you see now on 7th and 10th.
Well, I think there's a room full of people that need to hear that from you then, because they're under the assumption that it is that. So,
Before we go back to the chat questions, something I want to get to, and we've talked about budget, and we haven't really talked about budget anywhere near enough probably in this conversation. Every 10 years, there is this anomaly, this additional pay period that as the city, already losing $3 million due to tax caps, whatever the case may be, has to dip into its reserves to pay this additional pay period for the city. Happened 10 years ago when none of you all were part of city government. It's happening this year. It will happen 10 years from now. Is there any leadership that can come out of the mayor's office that can figure out a way for this not to be the impact that it is to the budget 10 years from now?
So I heard discussion on your guys' meeting the other night about the budget, about different ways you might be able to correct that. I'd say continuing to add to the cash reserves. It took what I hear, 4 years to build up to where we're at right now. We're spending half of that to make up for our losses at this point. So we spend a few more years, we make sure we add to that cash reserve, we be fiscally responsible and try not to spend too much more than what we have to, and in a few years we'll have that money back, and in a few years from there hopefully we'll have more. So in 10 years we'll have the money to take care of that. I think it's just planning ahead. If it happens every 10 years, then we should know that it's going to happen in another 10 years. Do the math. So just conservative spending and continuing to add into the cash reserve sounds to me like the simplest way to go, based off of what I heard from your guys' meeting.
There's really two options. One, just as he detailed, or two, you go to a twice-a-month pay cycle. That would have to be negotiated through the unions. So either one would be a viable option. It's just what's the best option.
Who's got the control? Mayor's office, council, both?
I think obviously in a negotiation standpoint, it's going to be the administrative side working with the unions. If you're talking about the part of planning out, I think it's a partnership. Bringing that in, needs over wants, planning ahead down the road.
Yeah, so Thomas makes a good point that it's something we have to plan for. And yes, we have planned for it, and we have a deficit-funded budget, and that's what's important is we've built the cash reserves. When I took over as mayor at the beginning of 2016, we had an approximately $240,000 to $260,000 cash reserve. We built that to over $3 million in the time that I've been mayor. And we've spent some of that back down. But our dedication is always to providing the best services we can to the community. So yes, in 2020, we'll see a low tax collection, which will hurt our 20 budget. And we'll have our 27th pay period, which won't cycle back around for another decade. And we also have the heaviest year of our fire contract with our firefighters comes in 2020. So those three things combined. It doesn't really all lean on the 27th pay. It's a three-way issue. We have a 3-year contract with our firefighters that has a 15% overall increase over those 3 years, and then some other wage-related agreements. It hits the hardest in 20. It won't hit as hard in 21. We won't have a 27th pay in 21, and hopefully we'll see a restabilization of our tax collection in that year. We won't have that either. So, but we would have never grown the cash reserves in the time I've been mayor if we weren't fiscally responsible week to week. I mean, it requires a constant monitoring of our finances and how we're spending and how we're operating to grow those cash reserves. It's difficult. We essentially get the same pie every year. We have to cut it into different slices and do that in ways that grows our departments to serve our city better. So to be able to do that, to do the road repairs we've done, which have been huge, to grow our police force back to a full force after a decade, to give raises after 10 years of no raises, to get our contract negotiations signed after years of no contract agreements, and then to have still put in the cash reserves, that's been tremendous, and we've done that through weekly management.
Okay. Do you want to jump back into it? You were looking out of the corner of your eye.
No, I was looking at something else, but
Okay.
but a lot of positives just portrayed there, right? But ultimately, it's going to have an impact on us down the road. That pie is going to get smaller. Not saying that people didn't deserve raises. However, the thing is, we're going to really have to focus on needs even more in the future.
You said positives portrayed. Do you see the
No.
regrowing of the police force as a negative?
No, I didn't say that. No, you ran through a lot of things.
Okay. I know we're running close. Hopefully this question can get us a short answer. I know there's at least one other chat question out there we want to try to get to, and then I want
All
to
right.
see if we have time to come back to something. What are each of your plans for unsolved crime and child neglect and abuse in our community? That one's going to be difficult to get in. We are under 7 minutes, so I need each one of you all to kind of bring this to a close. What are each of your plans for unsolved crime and child neglect abuse in our community? Dave, I think that starts with you.
So that is a heavy question, and that's an unfortunate subject. That will lean onto our police department. So let me back up a little bit. The city of Richmond.
Don't back up too far.
Okay, the city of Richmond has an executive branch and a legislative branch. Does not have a judicial branch. So we have a law enforcement department that will arrest the people that don't abide by the laws in our city. When you get into following up on cases, you're getting into the county, the court system, the prosecutor, defender's office, and that is not a function of city government. So we'll continue to rely on our police department, who cares very much about this community, to take people who are breaking laws off the streets. Following up on that, from jail to court to cases, it will all move to the county at that point. So our police will continue to do their job.
I'll make that one real simple. I have to agree with Dave. That's the exact answer to the question.
It will be with the county, and any support that we can give, obviously, we'll give it.
Okay. This is going to be very quick. We're under 5 minutes. And I've heard you say need versus wants on a number of different occasions. So I'd like you to take a minute, and each one of you define a need versus a want with some specific thing that you think we've spent money on that's a want as opposed to a need, and what would you think the need would be?
I think the bike path is a want. I think needs are essential services, getting back into making sure that we have trash, fire, police cars, all the things necessary to ensure public safety and the essential services.
Need versus want.
Yeah, needs are absolutely our essential services. That is when we get into how we serve this community and how we budget for our street department. When you look at needs versus wants, you do have to look at quality of life and community development, and you have to weigh out those projects as they come forward, and they're very difficult. And when Jamie says the bike path is a want, it's not singled out as a single project that the city gets as a budget line item. That's an opportunity to partner with the state where they pick 80% of that tab to invest millions of dollars in your city. So those are difficult when they come forward, whether or not you want to invest in those. Because when the state's willing to invest millions and millions of dollars, do you turn that down, or do you accept that and accept a designation that calls Richmond a stellar city in the state of Indiana? So you weigh those out, but the needs will always be in the essential services: police, fire, trash, and infrastructure.
So I have to agree with the needs, essential services by far, first responders. Now, with the wants, first responders, we got to have brand new fire trucks. We can't have a motor pool with a couple $1 million fire trucks sitting around as spares. But police cars, on the other hand, I love our brand new police cars. They're sharp looking, but I wouldn't mind having them with rust on them. I mean, if that's what we had to have, there's plenty of them out there. Normally 3 will respond to a call. So, if one of them, the fuel pump goes out and he's got to pull over and let the other one take control, take control. But there's a lot of things that we could just deal with what we already have rather than buying new. Work trucks, we don't have to have brand new trucks for work trucks. It's nice when we can, but that's money that we can save. So that would be a want.
Okay. Thomas Owens, Dave Snow, Jamie Lopeman, thank you all very much for being here. Thank you for the time. Brian, thank you for being here.
You.
We appreciate our partners, the Wayne County Area Chamber of Commerce, Hometown Media Group, and 1490 WKBV and 100.9, and G1013, where you can hear the audio of this and In Focus every week, Sunday mornings at 6 a.m. So, wanted to get them in. Reminders. You can vote now. Voter registration office is open, 301 East Main Street. Monday, 8:30 to 5, Tuesday through Friday, 8:30 till 4:30, Saturday, October 26th, as you see there on the screen, and November 2nd, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and then early voting, October 28th through November 1st. That's Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Coleman Center, as well as First English Lutheran Church. The Coleman Center will also be open from 10 until 3, Saturday, October 26th and November 2nd. If you need more information, you see the clerk's office phone number is there, as well as their website. They are loaded with plenty of information. And please, if you don't go vote early, use Election Day, Tuesday, November 5th from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Coleman Center, Mount Olive Baptist Church, First English Lutheran Church, First Baptist Church, and the Golay Center. Election night, we will be here live beginning at 6 p.m. The candidates and their watchers will actually be up in the library here at IU East. We are partnering with the library to house some of that, so we are looking forward to that. Join us as we are live beginning at 6 p.m. It will only take a couple of hours probably for us to get through. And we do apologize. I understand there were a number of questions we were not able to get through that came in through social media. Hopefully the candidates will look back and take a look at those and try to answer them online. I wish you well.